God is Father, Son, and Spirit. God has always been Father, Son, and Spirit. What we believe about who God is defines how we see the world and how we live our lives. If God is Father, Son, and Spirit, therefore God is three in one, and God is community. And if we, humanity, are made in the image of God, then we will find our fulfillment in community, not in our individual self-centered pursuits, but in relationships of love. God the Father is with us. God the Son is for us. And God the Spirit is within us and among us. And because of these things, we can love fully, completely, without fear. The Apostle John says, "Greater is he who is in us than he who is in the world." And if we believe that, what can stop us from doing what Paul says in Galatians 5:13? For you were called to freedom, brothers and sisters. Only do not use your freedom as an opportunity to indulge your flesh, but through love serve one another. Or what Peter says in 1 Peter 2:16 and 17. Live as free people, not using your freedom as a pretext for evil, but as God's slaves. Honor all people. Love the family of believers, fear God, honor the king. So one thing that I think holds us back from loving affectionately, authentically, passionately is an unhealthy instinct to pick and choose, to find ways to justify that picking and choosing instinct, that picking and choosing behavior we find in ourselves. We come up with answers to bad questions. And so no matter how well we work out the answers, we won't find the right answers, the healthy answers, the answers that will lead us home if we're asking the wrong questions. Our logic can be impeccable. Our motives can be pure, our hearts full of love, but the ancient, 1980s, computer programming slogan still holds true. G-I-G-O, garbage in, garbage out. In Luke chapter 10, Jesus gets ambushed by someone who is desperate to have the right answers to the who's in and who's out question. I say ambush because this particular instance, because the text clearly says that the challenger questioned Jesus in order to justify himself. Lots of times in the Gospels, we read that so-and-so tested Jesus with a question. And from our perspective, after 2 millennia of worshiping Jesus as the incarnate God, that sort of language kind of gets under our skin or makes us nervous and suspicious. How dare someone test Jesus? You don't test Jesus, you obey Jesus. But the language of testing comes right out of the teacher of the law tradition from which Jesus relates to the religious culture of his day. Testing a rabbi is how you found out where they stood, what they believed, how heavy was their yoke. Of course, as with any good practice, it can be done for self-serving motives or for honest, truth-seeking motives. So it isn't because the expert in the law from Luke 10 tested Jesus that I suggested his questions were an ambush, but because he tested Jesus in order to justify himself. And we need to be careful when we come to the Bible in order to justify ourselves. When we ask questions of the scriptures, are we seeking God, or are we seeking to feel good about something we want to do or have already done? The ambush comes in the form of a typical two-part question among experts in the law of Moses. Rabbi, what must I do to inherit the life of the age to come? What must I do to inherit eternal life? And then a follow-up question. There's always a follow-up question based on how the particular rabbi answers the first question. And there's nothing at all wrong with the first question. So Jesus responds with a question of his own. What's in the law? How do you read that? How do you understand it? The expert replies with what Jesus eventually enshrines as the greatest commands. Deuteronomy 6:5. Love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your mind, with all your soul, with all your strength. And love your neighbor, plus Leviticus 19:18. Love your neighbor as yourself. And you can imagine Jesus' eyes lighting up as he responds, well said. Do this and you will live. Says the lawyer, wanting to win the point. But who's my neighbor? Luke 10:29. Who is my neighbor? Now, as we go forward from this point, watch how Jesus reverses the ambush. And remember a couple things. The experts in the law had never heard Jesus tell this story before. We've heard this story forever. So the end isn't a surprise to us. The experts in the law had never heard the Jesus spin on this. And experts in the law, reminder number 2, experts in the law were typically Pharisees. Priests and Levites were typically Sadducees. Now, with those 3 things in mind, that nobody's heard this story before, not the way Jesus is about to tell it, and that the experts in the law were typically Pharisees, and that priests and Levites were typically Sadducees, listen again to Luke 10:30 through 32. A man was going down from Jerusalem to Jericho and fell into the hands of robbers who stripped him, beat him dead, and beat him up and went off, leaving him half dead. Now, by chance, a priest was going down the road, but when he saw the injured man, he passed by on the other side. So too a Levite, when he came up to the place and saw him, passed on the other side. A priest has come by, a Levite has come by. Jesus is talking to an expert in the law who they've just had a real good connection over Deuteronomy 6:5 and Leviticus 19:18. So who do you think the expert in the law expects to be the next person to walk by the fallen traveler? Jesus, just hear the reversal, hear the punch in the gut that Jesus delivers when the hero of the story is not another expert in the law like the 2 of them, not even another Jew with whom, said expert might have some serious disagreements, but a subhuman Samaritan? It's such an explosive reply that at the end of the story, the expert in the law can't even bring himself to say the Samaritan. He can't even get it out of his mouth. His reply does show that he understood the larger point, the one who showed mercy to him. It's by using the rhetorical force of this dramatic reversal that Jesus creates for himself an opportunity to reverse the orientation of the man's question, who is my neighbor? The question that kingdom people should be asking then, according to Jesus, is not, who is my neighbor? Because that gets us real deep into the business of judging another man's servant. Because, my neighbor dresses the right way, eats the right way, worships the right way, belongs to the right order. In other words, if they don't fit into my bounded set, my group, they aren't my neighbor, and so I don't have to love them. because God said, love my neighbor. But if I build walls around a certain group of people and say my neighbors live inside the walls, other things and people live outside the walls, then I get to answer the question in a way that makes me feel comfortable. No, the questions that kingdom people should be asking, according to Luke 10, are, what does love require of me? To whom can I show mercy? To whom can I exhibit compassion? To whom can I show myself a neighbor? Those are introspective questions that get us to the heart of who we are as Christians, whether or not we're exhibiting the fruit of the Spirit, because it's not up to us to decide who's saved and who isn't. It's up to us to love the Lord our God with all our heart, our soul, our strength, all our understanding, to love our neighbors as ourselves, and to love one another as Jesus has loved us, and let the chips fall where the Spirit draws them. Love doesn't have time to concern itself with anything else.